Good evening. We'll try that again. Good evening. I know it's been a long Sunday afternoon. Many of you have had a busy afternoon. Several of us had busy afternoons. Hope you saw our extended family this morning. Some of you were wondering who some of that crew was. You didn't get to see the mom and dad. That was Megan and Michael Payne's 3 children. They were in a wedding this morning, an unusual time for a wedding, granted. And it was one of those, I've never heard of that particular type of wedding, but it was a wedding that was at a no children wedding. If you had children, some of y'all, has anybody ever been in one of those before? Okay, I didn't think I had. Okay, some of you have. I guess I understand that. You're trying to have the festivities and maybe things very done in a Christian way. But she called several weeks ago and said, what are y'all doing May, what's the day? 5th, 6th, day 6th. What are y'all doing May the 6th? And of course, I did the right thing. I immediately said, as soon as I talk to Pam, I'll let you know. And she said, wow, 4, because we knew we were going to have a door that weekend. But those children were incredibly well behaved. And we took them over to lunch at Casa Grande. And somebody took pity on us. I don't know if it was one of you guys. By the way, if it was one of you guys that was at Casa Grande, thank you for taking care of lunch. Don't know who did it. But we were getting ready to leave, and I called the guy over, and he said, it's taken care of. I threatened the manager there, because we go there so often we have our own booth. But he said, no, senor, I didn't. He did not do it. He said, someone did it, and they told me I can't tell you. So if you're in the audience, thank you. If you're out there somewhere and listening, this is being recorded. Thank you. We were incredibly grateful for that little touch from God in that moment. I don't know if they took pity on us. It may have been that. Kids are well behaved. It all went great. One thought before I get into the lesson. We're going back to Luke 15. By the way, we're headed back. We're back on the porch, but it's kind of the side porch. We're headed to the back porch next Sunday night, Lord willing. That's where we're going, but I want to kind of take this journey with you again. A lot of neat things happening in this particular story with the prodigal son, the father at home, and the older son. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But as this song was chosen, I'm not sure why Lance chose it. But this is a powerful song, and I'm not going to chide you, brother, but verse 3 is real powerful. So we're going to walk back through this. 2014, our theme was rescue here at the congregation. Through the year, there were 8 lessons that I did focused on an alliterative of that. Restore the fallen, evangelize the world, serve the needs of your family and your neighborhood. R-E-S-C. Choose to make a difference, choose to be different in making a difference. You utilize every member, and edify one another. That was the lesson that the sermon series that I did at the congregation in Tennessee this last week, really well received. But we found this theme song, and they love re-energizing it. And this is a song, not because it's not our theme anymore, but look at the words to this song about congregations. And I just want to remind us of this. Look at what this song says. Remember, we call ourselves the Lighthouse. It's been ever since I've been here, Lord willing, that we are a place that's looking for those who are hurting and helping those. Look at the words. I'm going to read through them. You sang them, but the 3rd verse you didn't get to sing, so I'm going to go through that one. It's okay. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying, snatch them in pity from sin and the grave. Weep o'er the erring one, lift up the fallen, tell them of Jesus, the mighty to save. Though they are slighting him, still he is waiting. Aren't you glad God's patient with us? I'm glad he's patient with me. Waiting the penitent child to receive. Plead with them earnestly, plead with them gently. He will forgive if they truly believe. We need to be reminded of that more often. He forgives us. Down in the human heart, crushed by the tempter, feelings lie buried that grace can restore. We know folks that are struggling. God says it's still there. Touched by a loving hand, wakened by kindness. I love this phrase. Chords that were broken will vibrate once more. Rescue the perishing, duty demands it. Strength for the labor the Lord will provide. Back to the narrow way, patiently win them. Tell the poor wanderer a Savior is that rescue the perishing, care for the dying. Jesus is merciful. Jesus will save. It fits in perfectly to the gentleman we're talking about tonight. He left home because he decided that's exactly what he wanted to do. Nobody else was doing it. In fact, probably in his day and in the culture in Luke 15, no one was allowed to do it. It's really weird when you look back at the story in Luke 15 and you look at the request that was made and the fact that the Father honored it, because there are a multiple number of individuals, even in this congregation, that I've heard through the years going, I would have never done that. Right? I almost want to ask you to put your hand up, but I don't want to put you on the spot, so do it in your heart. Your son comes to you, your daughter comes to you, and you've got something set aside for her. Maybe it's for college. You've got it set aside. You've got plans, big plans for her. Or you've got the plan set aside for the grandchildren and maybe their college fund. And they come to you and say, no, I want to take it and do what I want to with it. How many of you, how many of me would go ahead, here's your card, go ahead and withdraw it all. I don't see any of you volunteering, so I'm going to assume that a lot of times you look at this particular story and go, what in the world was Dad thinking? Some of my hardest decisions in parenting through the years have been those moments of letting my children fall when it's safe for them to do it. I've noticed a resurgence of that with another one that's in the room, whom I won't mention because she'll want to come up here. Those moments that you walk along beside and you're close enough in case, and those moments when you've got to let them go a little further, and those moments when you've warned them about a particular thing, and instead of listening, they choose to do something different. Go, okay, are you going to learn the hard way this time? You're going to get to feel what it feels like when you fall, as long as it's a safe fall. Now, some of you are minding going, how in the world can it be a safe fall for a father to give his son his inheritance, knowing his spirit, knowing what he's going to do with it? Maybe he didn't know. Maybe this was the side of his son he'd never seen before. I don't know the full story here. I just know that this story is shared in the text. And in reality, and I kind of want to keep getting ahead of myself, the story here is not as much about the son who left as the one that stayed at home, but we're going to get there eventually. But for tonight, I want you to help me take a look at an individual, and I'm going to introduce it the same way each time because I love the setting of this that kind of sets. Peering down the hillside, you see the homestead, surrounded by a strong split rail fence. The yard is expansive. The long winding drive cuts down the left side of the property. Cast off toys that have been long forgotten remind you that time has passed quickly. The house is 2 stories, large but not overwhelming. Black shutters flank each window. Landscaping manicured and the yard trimmed. In the background, barns are well kept and activity can be seen as the investment of hard days in the fields now needs to be managed. Affluent but not flashy. Wealthy but not wasteful. There are prominent features. The windmill, the corrals, the tire swing under the aged tree that stands towering alone in the front yard. However, the one feature that stands out above else is the large inviting wraparound porch lined with rocking chairs. A small round table holds the oft-used checkers set. A sleeping dog stationed near the screen door. Muddy boots from the field are left on the first step. A gathering place at the end of the day. Iced tea and lemonade have been shared here. There's no better place for late night cups of hot chocolate and in the cool of fall evenings. Dates end in the swing on the far end of the porch where long moments of silence are filled with spectacular views of a star-filled sky. The porch is served as base during intense games of tag. It has served as a safe haven from sudden spring showers. Stories, jokes, and serious discussions have found an audience here. Laughter, tears, and life have been shared on this porch. He leaves home to make his own way. In his heart and mind, he knows what he wants, and he thinks it's better than what's at the house. I would love to go around and rehearse how you felt the first time you left home for that time when you knew it was going to be a while before you'd be back. That time when you knew getting into the car as you waved to, if it was mom or dad or just mom or whoever it may be, the significant adult was at the house, that you knew this journey's going to be different. And as you head away and drive down the road, as you choke back the tears, you're trying to look like you know what you're doing. And you know full well that this journey is headed in a direction of uncertainty but excitement. I can remember the first time after I came home from school. After I left to go to school, I'd already worked 2 part-time positions in ministry. But I can remember one of the first times after I went home and drove down Egypt Road just outside of Bluff City, Tennessee, packed up that little Pinto, that 72 Pinto. I had that one. I had the one that had the gas tank back there where it's not supposed to be. I loaded that thing up. It doesn't take much to load a Pinto. I headed off from there after I'd come home from Freed-Hardeman University. I went over to Statesville, North Carolina. And when you think of those journeys and when you move into it, I thought when I left school, I really knew what I was doing. See, anytime you start on that kind of a journey, you've somewhat prepared yourself. You've either educated yourself or you've had certain experiences. And whatever this young son had at this point, he thought, I've got this figured out. And in Luke 15, as you already have turned there, and I'm getting back there, not many days after. I've always wondered how long it took. Have you? How many days did it take to use up what he thought was going to last a while? It's amazing when you're in a particular place and you're making choices. You know, some of the things he attempts to do at his own way fail miserably. Anybody else ever been there? Anybody else ever said, I've got this figured out and know exactly what I'm going to do, and then all of a sudden, boom, you end up face down. You wonder why in the world it didn't work out the way I planned. Do you think he left the house figuring it was going to end up this way? I don't think so. I don't think he left the house figuring, in a few days I'm going to blow it all. And I'm not going to have a job. I'm not going to have any food. I'm not going to have a place to stay. Because he'd never felt that before. He had always been taken care of. Back at the house. The one with the porch. Everything was good there. See, it's possible sometimes to have it so easy at home that the expectation is the world's going to be the same way. Well, it's not. Life is difficult. There are times when I can remember my several years at Freed-Hardeman University, and I talk about that in one thing. And congratulations to the baseball team. That's the team that that'd be Dalton Langford. Chris is the dad. That's the team that Dalton is playing for, and they have won, and they're going on further. I can remember especially my precious days in college, and I know many of you can as well. There's nothing like that moment of you're kind of on your own, but you still have other, kind of fail-safes, and there are people that are kind of there. It'd be maybe the dorm parents. It was for me. It was a special lady that lived out at Refuge Church of Christ that decided to adopt me. In my life, God has always made sure that there's somebody watching after me. Evidently, he figured I needed a little extra help. And when you have that person, it's always going to be. But when you are by yourself, when you're alone, and you're making those choices, it can be so much more difficult. You see, our intended destination rarely works out. We have, and for any of us, I would even dare say for those of you that had everything laid out, plans, college, graduation, extracurricular, even additional education, masters, doctorates, whatever you had laid out, there was some bend in the road, there was some change that happened that was unexpected. And it's how we deal with that transition that makes all the difference. It can make us or break us. You see, when he got to that point, and here's that, not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country. They were wasted, his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land. He didn't plan for a famine. He didn't plan it when the situation is in, and in his mind, I'll get there. What if I spend what I have, I'll get a job. I get there, and if there's some other situation, and all of a sudden food is scarce. Things are difficult. The world is not a friendly place. And he realizes, man, I made the wrong choice by leaving home now. It was the way I left home. It wasn't going from home. It was leaving home thinking that if I just had what I had there and I take it with me, it's going to be enough. And it's not. It's not enough. And he does something that we've all done. There are two major thoughts I want to share with you. I know it's normally three. That's my normal routine. But I just want to share two tonight. The first one kind of gets down to the point, too many of us, and one author put it this way, too many of us only rehearse making things right. Too many of us stop at good intentions and never actually follow through. We think about apologizing but never do. We think about living on a budget but we never do. We think it through that it would take what it would take to revitalize our relationships but fail to take action. We rehearse the steps we need to take to become more sold out and submitted to God, but we never actually get up and do them. We rehearse a devotional life. We rehearse, and you fill in the blank. Because see, that's what he does. There's safety on the porch, but rehearsal does not equal return. How many times have you caught yourself in the middle of some situation going, here's what I think I should do. This would work out better. If I just do this, then everything is going to be okay. Because that's exactly what he's doing in the pig pen. If you look back in verse 15, he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and when he sent him into his fields to feed the swine. When you're doing something that you've seen done before, now I'm making some assumptions here. Because when he thinks back about this moment and what's happening back home, the place with the porch, where there's safety. When he's thinking back about that moment in time, he's seen individuals. He's never had to do this before, I'm guessing. Now, maybe he has. Maybe in growing up, I know around my house, I was the servant son. I don't know about at your house. But the chores weren't done by someone that my daddy hired. That's why he had me. He told me that on several occasions. One of the reasons you're here is so I can teach you how to do some of these things. We had a couple of hogs. We had one cow. We had a horse. Had several chickens. And we had a farm big enough to feed half of Sullivan County. And that's the part I never understood. We didn't have a little beside the house garden. Dad turned 2 acres of backcountry field into garden. Corn, beans, watermelon, cantaloupe, potatoes, carrots. If you could grow it, it was in the garden. So it wasn't like I didn't know how to do all those things. I know how to do those things. I've chosen not to continue to do them. Pam's tried for years to get me to do a garden at the house. I use my schedule as an excuse. Because if you have a garden, you have to stay in that garden. That garden will catch up to you if you do not do what you're supposed to do every day in taking care of that garden. He's here and he's feeding the pigs. Who's ever fed pigs? I'm sure several of you have done that. One of the funnest things you've ever done, right? There are moments. I drove, when I told you, I took a little nostalgic journey when I went back home. Went around to the houses that Dad built, took some pictures. I'm going to put that together and share it somewhere. I've got a sermon idea in mind from some of that. But I went by one of the old houses where the old barn was, and also where the hog pen was. You know the difference between a barn and a hog pen? Raise your hand. Oh, you know what that is? You don't put the hogs in the barn. And some of you may, they just don't know how to live. They've only got one way to live. It's sloppy, nasty. I can remember the aroma. That was the one thing I feared more than anything else. God, I was going to go to school that morning smelling like the pigs. Because it's awful. The sound. Oh, I can still hear it. They love to eat. And they'll eat anything. He was feeding a good... We make the assumption that this is a good Jewish boy. It's not really filled in the blanks, but the anticipation. Here's an individual taking care of filthy. Now, I know filthy, but to a Jew, past filthy, unclean. I have never, in any moment, and ever feeding those pigs going, I might try that. Never once did it ever come across my mind, I might just jump right in there with them. Nasty. How could you ever get to the point? And I stand before you telling you something. I've never been hungry in my life. Never. You go, what you never? I've seen you eat. I've never been hungry. I've been so phenomenally blessed in my life. There's always been somebody willing to feed me. I swore, I told the individual, shouldn't have said that story. The individuals at Shady, do you think Pam doesn't feed me? This constant barrage of food. And this is in the, up in Shady Valley where they keep bringing the food back and they fill your plate up for you. Remember that place, that house that you go to? When you empty it, they figure you want more. I've never been hungry. I can't imagine being at a place. And it's at that point when you get to that spot, that moment when you realize this is, wow, what got me here? Oh, I got me here. What were you thinking? In fact, that's in essence, he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that swine ate, and no one gave him anything. When he came to himself, that probably didn't take long. I'm guessing. I don't know. Again, we don't know any kind of time frame, how long it took him to blow it, but I think it took him quite a while to know it. Short time. You stand face to face with a pig and realize we're on the same plane. They don't have to be anymore. That's when he starts doing this rehearsal. How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? But it wouldn't have done any good, because it would have been real easy. It would have been real easy for him to go, yeah, but that won't work. Because I know my dad, and I know and I know I've already asked him, and he gave me everything that's mine, and there's nothing else left for me at the house. Nothing. And kind of that's where he's living. He's going, I've blown it. He no longer considers me. And what you've got to remember, again, in our culture, not something we're familiar with, but in their culture, you leave home, you do something that brings shame on the family, they will disown you. You see it. You are no longer my son. You are no longer my daughter. Now, I say that in the audience of people that just, now, maybe there's someone in here to say, well, I can think of something my son or daughter could do that would make... Could you? In that culture, they could. It was understood, brought up, trained that way. You violate this family, who you are no longer recognized as my child. He knew that. That's part of the reason he's going back home going, maybe, just maybe, I can get a job. Because I know how those servants eat. See, that's the thing that is most powerful about this is he actually goes back to the place that he feels unworthy to be at. If you've ever failed, that's all of us. Why can't they know what and all the buts start flying in, and we start figuring out, well, but they're going to think about me this way, they're going to look at me this way, they're going to imagine. If you're at a point that you realize, okay, I got two choices. I can stay here and die. And it's not just a physical, it's as much a spiritual death that is kind of implying, but it's a physical. He's going to go home. But you see what happens? Rehearsal does not equal return. Good intentions. We rehearse the steps but never take the first one. He did. He finally, whatever the reaction, he had no idea, I think, in his mind. In fact, I think he rehearsed the worst. And that's what Father, no, I'm not worthy. He actually used the words, I'm not worthy to be your son anymore after what I've done to you. I've humiliated you. I've taken my inheritance. I've wasted. I have nothing to offer you. I'm coming back empty-handed and worthless. Just give me a job. We want to settle for the servant when the Father wants sons. He had servants. If you look all the way back in Luke 15, at the first part of this, and we're going to do this every time, this story of the sheep, the coin, and the sons, because it's not, I want to change the heading. It's not the parable of the lost son, it's the parable of the lost sons. Then all the tax collectors and sinners drew to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes complained, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. So he spoke this parable to them, saying, what's he trying to say? What they were saying is Jesus is with people that don't deserve to have people spend time with them. I've always wondered as he moves along and he tells the story of the lost sheep. And again, all of these stories have loopholes and things in them when you overanalyze them and go, what do you leave 99 sheep and go look for one? That doesn't add up economically. It doesn't make sense. You still got 99. You could leave the 99 and go get the one, and a wolf could come in. Somebody could come in and steal some of the 99. What are you going for the one for? Because every sheep is important to a shepherd. No matter if it's the frail sheep, the wandering sheep, the sheep that doesn't know any better but to drink sorry, no good water. Because sheep are not really bright. And they need somebody to look after them. How do you celebrate a coin that you found? Just sweep the whole house and end up finding it. You know that feeling when you've lost something and you're absolutely certain where you lost it, but you can't find it? You do that where you're going back and you're retracing. Some of y'all may have lost something recently, or maybe you're still looking for something and hadn't found it. Where you retrace back through your steps and you go, I know where that was. I wonder if we can retrace our steps back to those people, those situations, those individuals that we've kind of lost. And say, where did that happen? What was the step? What was the moment that occurred? And to go back to that moment and try to the best of our ability to refine what we've lost. But see that he comes here. When he came to himself, he said, I mean, my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger. I will rise, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. He arose, came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, ran, fell on his neck, kissed him, and the son said to him, Father, he'd already had it rehearsed. Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight, no longer worthy to be called a son. It's interrupted. The father says, bring the robe, bring the ring, bring the sandals. Why? Again, I take you back all over to the first thought I had. What did you give him the money for in the first place? You should never have done that. Does God trust us with stuff? And we blow it? You see, God knows sometimes some of those lessons are harder than others. Remember when I told you about knowing safe fall? I'm going to go out on a limb here in an assumption you may have never heard about this passage. We're told two things about God, about us, that sometimes just kind of weigh real heavy on us. One is in 1 Corinthians where it says that God will never allow us to be tempted above that we are able. You ever given in to any temptation? Well, yeah, but that's not God's fault. It's not because I couldn't not give in, it's because I chose not to. Because God's not going to allow me to be tempted above what I'm able, but He will make an escape. And also the marvelous thing about God is He knows us at a level, He knows what we're capable of and what we're incapable of. And there are those moments in our lives sometimes that He trusts us further than we trust ourselves. Because He knows there's a lesson that we need to learn that we'll never learn unless we do it ourselves. You ever heard those words out of any child of yours? That initial moment when they realize they don't need you as much anymore, and when they learn to do some of those first things, whether it's walking or eating or writing or running or riding or whatever it may, whatever stage they're at, all of a sudden the training wheels are off and they're on their own and you're going, oh, please, Lord, keep them safe. Because God will never let us go further. Or let me put it this way. There's always a road that leads back to the front porch. Always. You can't get far enough away from the house that He can't be available. Look at John 1. We realize our unworthiness. We rationalize we can work it out on our own. We resolve to fix it. And in our best moments, we fail. John chapter 1, verse 12 specifically. Let's start at verse 10. He was in the world was made through Him, and the world did not know Him. He came to His own, and His own did not receive Him. But as many as received Him, He gave the right to become children of God. To those who believe in His name, who were born not of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. You see, in John 1:12, Jesus says, I want to love you as a son, not as a servant. You're not going to work for me, you're going to work with me. You can return home when you realize that it's the only true place you're loved. See, no matter where he was at that moment, he was away from the house. All of us know that there's only one